On the last lap in the final turn of the 2001 Daytona 500, NASCAR was brought to its knees when Dale Earnhardt Sr., a 7-time champion, met his untimely demise and died as a result of what looked seemingly to be an uneventful accident. But that turned out not to be the case. But it also adjusted and refocused everyone's dedication to something that maybe we all took for granted, and that was safety. And my next guest lived through that, raced when safety really wasn't a priority, and then set about a career after getting out of the race car to make damn sure that the next generation and the generation after that had an eye towards safety. He is really the impetus behind a lot of the seats that we now see used, not only at the Cup level and the Xfinity level, but also across the length and breadth of the United States in short track racing. He's Randy LaJoie, a 2-time Xfinity champion, and he joins me now. Randy, I think I captured it all, did I not?
Well, being a crash test dummy, you didn't say I was that, but we have learned a lot. And, Dale Earnhardt, as good as the race car driver I think his legacy is how many lives he saved.
Yeah.
Because we had not a good run for about 4 or 5 years before him. And we started in the modifieds, and then they fixed that, by making the cars softer. So, that was a basal neck injury. We weren't smart enough to realize that your head can separate from your shoulders. So we had to hold it on because, crashing race is kind of dangerous. And it's amazing. I took my dad, we were up at Stafford last year for the SRX race, and he got up there early and we run around, and I parked over in turn 3 and I said, Pop, remember this? Because he launched it out of there, and then 76 Sizzler and Bob Johnson's 17 car. He went, Charlie J blew a motor, and he went out of the ballpark at Stafford, and he goes, yeah, the trees were a lot smaller. But you look at those cars, I enjoy going to museums and just looking inside the cars, because those guys are some tough sons of bitches that drove those cars, because they didn't go a lot slower than we are, or that I did, or my kid is going today. They're damn near going the same speed, but their safety systems, oh my goodness. Well, it's amazing how far they've come. But the short track level, we're still hurting too many short track guys. I do believe it's not the industry's fault, because I think you just can't blame the racetracks. Your family's racetrack up there. If you don't have containment, you don't compete. If you don't wear a head and neck restraint, you don't compete. And that's the way it should be. And I think we need more racetracks to say, hey, we don't want you to come here, because racing is very similar to playing Russian roulette. And man, that's a scary game with all the bullets in the chamber. Racing, if you take a good seat, you take a bullet out. You take a head and neck restraint, take a bullet out. You take the seat belts, take a bullet out. Fire suit. I'm not quite sure how many people wouldn't play Russian roulette with no bullets, but that's very similar. That's what we do. It's always going to be dangerous, but boy, oh boy, there's enough information out there today that should keep us from going to work on Monday.
And Randy, a lot of that information as it applies to seat technology and seat containment, it was an uphill battle for you. I remember when you crisscrossed the country with a little trailer in the back, and this was even before you really had computerized video, and you would post video on a VCR that you got in-car camera that showed the seats that were being used were doing nothing to contain the driver. How did you come up with the concept of containing from the shoulder area the way that now we're all so very used to?
I went to a trade show with my dad in Hartford, and my brother, and Mark Donahue was there, 1971. And he had his Penske Camaro Trans Am that he just won the Trans Am championship with. And he had this seat in the car. And my dad says, I would like to sit in it. And my dad sat in it, and Mark says, I'll build you one. I built them for myself. I'll sell you one. So Mark sold my dad this seat. He tried putting it in his modified. It was a lot bigger, because Mark with the Trans Am car went all the way down to his knees. So my dad cut it up, got the thing to fit, cut the headrest off, but used the seat bucket for his hips and his shoulders. He just cut the headrest off. He just didn't have a whole lot of use for that. You see why he can't turn his neck now. But so he bought it for Mark. Once I started racing, he goes, use that seat. Okay. Once I started doing good and guys want you to drive their race car, I mean, why wouldn't you? And from going from that style seat that held me by my shoulders to going to a rib style seat that everybody else had with no shoulder support, it was very uncomfortable because I had to work in holding myself in the vehicle because my shoulders weren't, I didn't have nothing to lean on. So I had to hold myself in the car. And I was like, wow, these guys are a lot tougher than I am. I said, I kind of like that old bucket seat. And so that's what I would use as much as I could. NASCAR 1994, they came into the shop and they said, listen, no more fiberglass seats. And I said, okay. I said, so I'm going to have this thing molded because it's round. It fit my body. It fit my shoulders. And I was okay. So I brought it to Brian Butler. He says, that thing's a piece of crap. I'll build you a custom seat. I've been racing for 15 years, won 4 championships. It's not a piece of crap. Mark Donahue kind of invented this thing in 71. I was like, okay. And I've driven in his custom seats and they didn't fit me all that well. So I said, okay. I took the seat and I left. Steve Richardson, we built one behind his house in a garage he was working out of. He just started his seats. So we worked on it for probably 2 months. And we finally got it done. I used it. I was like, wow, it needs some work. Still needed some work. He goes, Randy, I don't want to mess with it. That's too hard. He goes, I don't want to mess with that. So, okay. So that was on the back burner. Met a guy that right down the road from the racetracks at Carpenters. They do a lot of stampings and retro work for Ford. And a guy that worked there said his buddy in Ohio does crazy little stampings like that. And he's a race fan. And he would call him up, talk to him. He's a race fan. He knew who I was. He had his Porsche that he does a lot of club racing with a Mark Donahue seat. So he knew exactly what it was. The man and his buddies just went to Kentucky Speedway that weekend, and they were there to do the Richie Petty driving experience, 4 or 5 of them. And they couldn't believe how uncomfortable the cars were with just those old rib protected seats. And okay, they ended up being black and blue and this and that. And they're like, man, my seat in my Porsche, track car is a whole lot nicer than this one. So I sent them the pitch. I sent them a seat, had it marked on there where I thought if I cut it and sliced it, Mark was a 180-pound guy at the time. I could downsize it or I can make it bigger. Well, about 6 months later, I get aluminum and a sizing fixture. And he says, is that going to work? And I was like, oh, my goodness. I said, this thing's awesome. Okay, now what? Now I got to hold them together and weld them. And it's been a uphill battle ever since.
And look, the technology, while it's the LaJoie seats are still very, very prevalent. Yes. In fact, the SRX series, they did a wonderful feature on the seats as they're part of that. You've got short track racers, as reluctant as they were, that now see that the performance goes up. And we go then to where NASCAR has gone with carbon fiber and form fitted seats. And from your perspective, is that where we are all eventually going to end up with space age material and form fitted seats when the price point comes down? Because I would think that's the one thing that's holding an awful lot of people back right now is the upper level seats are so out of reach for the Saturday night racer.
Absolutely. In 94, I wanted to try carbon fiber because I was going to have some kind of investment.
Mm-hmm.
It either was going to be into forming aluminum, or it could have been, forming carbon fiber. And they said that would never happen. So, okay, so I went the route of forming aluminum, and which wasn't easy. Uh, I don't think aluminum seats are ever going to go away just because we passed the same tests. If there was a test that we couldn't pass, then I would say that seat's better than ours.
Right.
One of the things in the years I've seen a lot of testing, a lot of video, is a lot of dummies didn't make it. A lot of dummies have. But a couple of dummies that didn't make it were in a carbon seat. And I said, why did that seat explode? And they said, well, I had a crack in it. Okay. I mean, you cannot see a crack? No, we can't see that. How do you check for cracks then in a seat? He said, well, we tap on it. We take it and we just tap on it. And if it's a dead spot, we throw it away. That's a little bit different because the memory is there. So that 18-inch seat, still an 18-inch seat until it gets pressure on it and then it breaks.
Yeah.
So the inspection process of aluminum seat, if it's bent, you straighten it and you stiffen it. If it's cracked, you weld it. There's not doing that, to those carbon seats. And they were on an average, $1,500 more per seat. But if they do come in, I mean, I don't mind. I almost got in bed with a guy about 5 years ago to build one. But the industry needs to be stricter on a new style seat, because his complaint was, well, the aluminum seats aren't this good. Won't meet that spec. I says, yes, they will. There's a short track spec out there that the dirt late models use now. Yeah. Some of these guys are starting to fiddle around with, which everybody should. I think it'd be easier to inspect. It's okay. That's a 39.2 seat, because there's seats out there that they have SFI headrest foam padding stickers. Well, that's an SFI seat because the headrest. No. Padding. The padding is, But I mean, if it's a rated seat, I'm all for. I've been pushing for rated seats forever. I just had a meeting today with a couple engineers up at Longhorn about coming out with common mounts for these dirt late models and the modifieds, because there's some seat mounting issues I'm working with. A guy we're doing a lot of tests. It's called CASM, CASM. It's a nice mount for sprint cars. I said, if somebody has a sprint car and they don't put this seat mount system in the car, they're just dumb, because I think it'll eliminate a lot of the problems that have been in sprint car racing when the cars drop. The dirt late models, seen it last week. G.R. Smith bicycled really hard, landed left side. He wrapped the bottom of the seat around the bottom of the car. I broke a T11, T12. I mean, how do you fix that? I mean, that wasn't a car problem. That wasn't a seat problem. It was just a crash problem. So, okay, this system, this CASM system, is going to fix that. We see a lot of these guys bicycle up. I mean, there's so much grip in these cars now. It's crazy how these things are bicycling up, whether it's a modified dirt late model. I mean, so we got to keep them on the ground. But if they do hit the ground, the system seems to be giving the driver a shock absorber for his back. It takes out 70% of the spine loads with all the testing that he's done. So I'm a fan of it.
Well, we certainly are a fan of the dedication that you've had, and most importantly, because unlike so many safety measures that were, costly and almost prohibitive for short trackers, even the safer barrier system, so many places you would think we could finally get to the point where all racetracks could afford it, but that's a topic for another day. You've dedicated your life and your business life to making where you came from much, much safer. And you're to be congratulated for that. And I guess if you have to hit your head as many times as you had to be able to at least wake up and say, I can give back to the sport, then I don't feel bad that you had so many crashes, my friend, because you have saved a lot of lives at short tracks across America. Forget the super speedways. We all know the stories there, but just the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night racers. And hey, little kids racing in quarter midgets and everything else. We start them early. Randy, you're a true Hall of Famer, and I appreciate your visiting with us here on Wind Tunnel.
Hey, thank you, Jack. Anytime. I love the safety aspect. There should be no secrets in safety. Racers always wouldn't tell you what setup they had because they didn't want you to go faster than them. And that's I have to change my thinking because I used to be me. Safety stuff is speed, but you got to have it.
Yeah.
And it's just not one, it's the whole darn system.
That's Randy LaJoie, everybody. We'll be back with more here on Wind Tunnel after these messages.